Welcome to Today Matters. My name is Ty, and I'm your Women's and Connect pastor here at Skyline Church. Today, I'm going to share a short devotional on God's faithfulness. Ruth 2:3 says, "So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and it just so happened that she found herself working in the field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech." Recently, I've had a few of our family friends move out of state, as I'm sure many of you have experienced this last year. Or maybe it's you who moved to a place where nobody knows your name and the outcome is still yet to be decided on if this was the right move or not. You know, that place where you have nothing left but to trust God, trusting that the move or big decision that you made was the right one. Or maybe it's a career change that you just made or something else real big in your life. It's scary no matter what age you are when you make decisions that affect everyone around you. Well, the year 2021 has brought a lot of changes and a lot of big decisions for many of us, both good and hard. As you know, we are not the only ones who have had to make tough calls that would potentially change the trajectory of someone's life forever. There is a crazy phrase in the book of Ruth that I just love. It's a phrase that is written throughout the book, as if every time you read it, the author wants you to read it with sarcasm and a smirk, in a good way, as if it's not clear that God is setting up this beautiful story in the middle of the hard. The phrase I'm referencing is this: "It just so happened." The phrase is repeated over and over throughout the book of Ruth, and it begs you to lean into it with curiosity and ask yourself, hey, maybe God really does see me and really does care about the little details of my life that don't seem to make sense right now. And maybe he really does work all things for the good of those who love him, according to Romans 8:28. You see, before Ruth 2:3 comes, there is an incredible amount of pain and unspeakable hardship in Ruth's life. Ruth had a few options for her life at this moment of pain. She was either going to trust God with the rest of her story, or she wasn't. It really is that simple. However, not necessarily that easy. Ruth had just lost her husband and decided to stay faithful to her husband's family and follow Naomi, her mother-in-law, to an unknown land with an unknown outcome. As stated, she had just lost her husband, and she would soon move to a town that would call her a foreigner, which nobody wanted. She knew she would not be respected in this new land. She also knew what she was up against, and she still chose the yes. She stayed steady in her even if moment of life. She learned to lean into the pain and choose the hard road of faithfulness in going to an unknown place with an unknown outcome. Ruth 2:3 is an incredible act of God's sovereign hand over her, even though she is still yet only gleaning from the field at this point. Ruth 2:3 says, "It just so happened that Ruth was in Boaz's field." This may seem like it isn't a big deal or it's insignificant, but it's a big deal and it's very significant. There were many fields that she could have chosen at this point, and for some reason, she chose Boaz's field to glean from. You see, back in this time, they didn't have a welfare system in place for the poor. So field owners would leave some of the barley behind for gatherers who were poor and couldn't afford much food. Ruth knew this and picked a field to glean from. She soon was recognized for her hard labor in the fields. Soon people noticed what an incredible hard worker she was, and that she nearly never took a break from the gleaning. Word spread to the owner about this young foreign woman and her sacrifice for her mother-in-law, and he took notice of her. He tells his workers to leave more barley behind to be picked up. There are so many more miracles in this story, but what you need to see is God's faithfulness woven throughout the tragedy. His faithfulness of provision, his faithfulness of setting up this crazy phrase, "It just so happened," wink, wink. It just so happened that Ruth decided to go glean from the barley fields. It just so happened that this young, single, poor, foreign girl was in this rich, godly man's field. It just so happened that he came to the field that day she was gleaning. It just so happened he took notice of her. It just so happened that he already heard of her sacrifice and of her character. Time after time, the most crazy situations happened as she learned to trust God in the midst of her unknown. Sometimes it's at the crushing of the threshing floor that our blessings come. And we see this later in her story. Some may call it a coincidence that all these just so happened moments kept coming up in Ruth's life, but we know better, don't we? It's God there in the hard. It's God there in the lack of understanding. It's God there in the ruthless trust that took you to the place that you would have never willingly gone to on your own, but you may have desperately needed that. It's God there when what seems like an impossible situation all of a sudden is possible. I'm not sure what your story is today, but one thing I can tell you is this: God sees you. He sees the unknowns in your life, and he cares about your story. And never forget, your today matters to God, because today matters.